nice schools. You might be religious. That contributes positively. So that basic correlation, those who give get statistically. And you can find the odd individual who's highly prosocial but is in a really nasty social environment. They're like a fish out of water. They're suffering because they're prosociality. That's the wrong adaptation for that environment. And so when you see someone that's not highly prosocial, often what that means is they have the capacity, but they had to turn it off because they live in such a nasty social environment that to be prosocial would just be to make yourself vulnerable to exploitation by others in your environment.
There are periods in history where you read about poor neighbourhoods. I'm thinking of America during the 19th century, early 20th century, where the labour movement was very strong. So the poorest neighbourhoods probably had the highest level of prosociality. There was a strong moral push towards working together. Can that still happen within the America of today, or are these?
It still is happening, and the beauty of our kind of research is that we show it crystal clarity. We can measure the effect of income, wealth, on prosociality, and the relationship is somewhat complex. The bottom line is, if you have money and if you use it to create a nurturing environment, then there's that relationship. But if you don't, there's no relationship or even a negative relationship. So in sociological terms, social capital trades off with financial capital. If you don't have money, often you have to cooperate just to get the things that you need, and you do. But if you have money, you can just pay for it with a credit card. And so when we engage school kids in what's called experimental economics games, cooperation games basically, in which they can decide to cooperate or not, the most cooperative kids are the ones that come from poor, nice neighborhoods. Those are the ones who cooperate most in an experimental setting. The rich kids don't cooperate so much, and that's because they're just not used to it.
I suppose about a decade back, we had a lot of talk about the end of history. It was, Francis Fukuyama's book, and the idea was that our social, political system had kind of come to the end, that this was the ultimate, this capitalist democracy.
Right. Was that ever wrong?
But that was kind of seen almost in Darwinian terms, wasn't it? That it had evolved and we'd ended up with the perfect system. I mean, is there an economic system which is more in tune with evolution than another, or are they all simply?
Well, there is, and now that I've become so involved with evolution and public policy, I've had a total immersion course in economics over the last couple of years, including behavioral economics, which is the new wave of economics, and it is shocking. The emperor has no clothes, and there's widespread dissatisfaction with neoclassical economics as something which went off on a trajectory which is completely bizarre with respect to real human behavior. So Homo economicus, as it's referred to, there's no relationship whatsoever with real people. Behavioral economics is trying to bring it back. All of this is kind of oblivious to evolution so far. And so it is truly scary to think that the theory that's been guiding social policy at a planetary scale is that out of touch with human nature. And that's the bad news. It's so out of touch that it's like a fundamentalist religion. And the good news is that evolution offers an alternative paradigm. And how quickly that can become established, we'll see. But if only the general public knew.
So what are some of the key items of the insights, the type of economy we might expect if we took evolution into account?
It's so fascinating, and it's a blend of principles that we regard as conservative and liberal. On the conservative side, on the kind of libertarian side, there's a strong need for local autonomy because people know their own problems better than anybody else. There really is a sense in which local communities decide their own fate, and then larger societies, such as governments, has to facilitate that process. On the other hand, the autonomy should not just be at the individual level. It's not the case that individuals can do whatever they like. The world is full of commons problems in which basically, in order to cooperate, you have to have strong norms, you have to have rules, and people have to abide by those rules. So there's a sense in which regulation prevails, but regulation has to be locally determined. So the autonomy and the locality exists at the level of small communities, not individuals. And then big government has to facilitate that process. So there's a mix. Regulation is important, but autonomy is important. You need to have a government, but that government needs to be structured in the right way so that it doesn't become part of the problem. And there's actually quite a bit out there to map this out, a surprisingly large amount. It's like the elements are there in order to do it right. But how quickly they can become assembled and we can attract everyone's attention to do it, we'll just have to see.
That's David Sloan Wilson, the author of Darwin's Cathedral. University of Auckland professor Brian Boyd is best known for his biography of Vladimir Nabokov, the author of, among other books, Lolita. He's also a passionate fan of Art Spiegelman, the author of the groundbreaking graphic novel Maus, and it was Maus and its use of animals to depict Jews and Nazis during the Holocaust that sparked an interest in evolutionary psychology. Brian Boyd is also the author of the recently released On the Origins of the Story, Evolution, Cognition and Fiction, an epic work in its own right which explores literature from the Odyssey right through to Dr. Seuss through the lens of evolution. I caught up with him earlier this week. You say our predisposition for fiction seems at first glance counterproductive in biological terms. Why do you say that?
Everything that we do has costs, even if they're only in time and energy. They may well also be in resources. I mean, we do print massive amounts of fiction for bookshop shelves and library shelves. All these are costs, and if telling one another things that both sides know are untrue, well, fiction is telling one another things that both sides know are untrue. And in the world of biological fact, where the senses are honed to be accurate, this seems a strange thing to have evolved, if it has evolved, as a trait across the human species.
But it has evolved, and it's a very interesting evolution. And I suppose it begs the question, is human nature itself the product of ongoing evolution?
Oh, very definitely so. I think there's no question about that, and in many, many ways, at many levels that we wouldn't have imagined. It's extraordinary the depths to which the forces of natural selection go, so that even the sperm and the egg have a kind of tussle in terms of whether the mother or the father gets most genes into the offspring. Yes, we've evolved. We've evolved not only physically but also psychologically, and that of course immediately raises the hackles of many who think that this is subjecting humans to biological determinism. But in fact, one of the main stresses of recent thinking about evolution and human nature is that we have evolved for imagination, for cooperation, for culture, for ways that it can allow us to track environmental changes, if you like, faster than mere genetic change can.
That notion of determinism has been around for quite a long time. And you quote George Bernard Shaw, who says, Darwinism seems simple because you do not at first realise all that it involves, but when its whole significance dawns on you, your heart sinks into a heap of sand within you. There is a hideous fatalism about it, a ghastly and damnable reduction of beauty and intelligence, of strength and purpose, of honour and aspiration. That is a very pessimistic view of that. We have, I assume, gone well beyond that.
Yes, well, I think Shaw had a very a falsely rosy view of the way he would like to see evolution, and I think that was very common in the late 19th century, the sense that Darwin's theory actually pointed towards eternal progress and the triumph of humankind over the rest of the world. Things are a little bit more complicated than that, but as I point out in the afterword that quote prefaces, I think we can see in a Darwinian point of view there's no grand purpose in the cosmos is not a sentient being, and only life forms have purposes. But if we look at Darwinian evolution, there's a steady enrichment of purpose to the stage that we have already, where our purposes include satisfying our better emotions and fulfilling our creativity and imagination.